You're listening to Three's a Crowd, the North East Footy Podcast, with Rye for Borough, Steve for Newcastle United, and Ted for Sunderland.
Good morning, Warren.
That's where it's wrong, isn't it? That's where it's wrong.
No, it's not. I actually, because that bit where Rye's supposed to be there, did you notice I paused? How professional that I paused. I paused and just didn't bring anybody in. I didn't bring me in and then bring you in, So you
I like that. I like that.
I do it. So yeah, just into that bit of technical expertise displayed on a Saturday morning. Here we are, Saturday the 11th of October. Happy 40th birthday to Rye's missus. That's why he's not here today. You could have done the show on Sunday, but unfortunately I couldn't. So here we are, me and Ted, and this hasn't been an unusual thing in the past, has it? We've often done shows without Rye because he's probably had more sick notes in than
Darren Anderton.
That's exactly what I was thinking of, Darren Anderton. But we thought, let's get together. This is the way it is. The two Premiership clubs together on a Saturday morning, having a chat.
As the Borough fans just logged out.
having chat about what's going on in a half-term report, if you like. We're into October now, and we're going to start with you, Ted, and Sunderland, who've taken not just yourself, I would imagine, but a lot of people by surprise.
Oh, absolutely, mate. I said the same last week, even before the Man United defeat. You couldn't have picked a better start of the season for us, to be honest with you. The only disappointment, you go to somewhere like Man United, you don't know which Man United's going to turn up. So that result was kind of almost felt like it was going to happen, to be honest with you. But the only disappointing result really for me was the Burnley one. And I think we just played another newly promoted side a little bit too early. We didn't really get out the traps with that one. Other than that, in terms of the recruitment that we've made, absolutely zero complaints there. There's question marks from a couple of fans about the likes of Arthur Masuaku, who hasn't played a lot of football in the last year. And the Premier League is a different pace to the Turkish Super League, with all due respect. So yeah, there's a couple that need to get up to speed a little bit more. But when you've got a team that's got 15 new signings and expecting them all to gel together, we couldn't have dreamed for a better start than this. By no means is this squad ready for Premier League football. That's the daft thing about it. It's there's still going to be a lot of gelling. You've got young players like Chrissy Rigg, who need to develop to that next level that we know that is in their locker, absolutely, but you couldn't call them ready-made Premier League footballers. So we'll lean on the experience of people like Granit Xhaka, who for me is joint signing of the season for us so far. You look at his stats. I know a game's not won by stats apart from the goals, but you look at the stats. He's probably been the most involved midfielder in the Premier League so far this season. His pass rate is exceptional. He brings a level of control to the game, Steve, that I just haven't seen in a Sunderland shirt before. We've had good players, and the one I'd liken him to is we had Stefan Schwartz for a season or two.
I remember him.
Late 90s. In fact, I think it might be in the early 2000s when we had him. He was the one who had the clause in his contract where he was allowed to go to space if he wanted. No, he wasn't allowed to go to space. That was it. Absolutely bizarre. There's probably worse ones out there now. But Schwartz was one of those players where you noticed if he wasn't in the team, and I think Xhaka will be one of those as well, where when he invariably does pick up a red card or a couple of yellow cards, he's going to be a miss. But he passes the ball well. He just lifts the team in terms of standards on the pitch, and that's what's impressed us there. In terms of the manager, by his own admission, I think he maybe got it slightly wrong at Man United last week, and he made a change. After the second goal, going 2-0 down, he made the change. We went to 3 centre backs, and to be honest, we looked a whole lot better after that. And I kind of I kind of show him a little bit even more respect for kind of almost admitting, yeah, got that one wrong. We should have played a different way. So yeah, listen, it's a learning curve for him as well. In terms of everything else he's done, the way he talks about connection and like sort of players coming back from injury, yeah, they're back from injury, but they haven't fully connected with the squad yet. And I love that. It's taken a really like kind of scientific approach. It's about sharing that same work ethic, the same ideals, covering for people when they're out of position. And it might be simple football and stuff, but that's what he's bringing. What Regis is bringing to that squad is just doing the basics right and really working hard for each other. We're not going to out football teams in the Premier League, Steve. You know that. You've played against some cracking teams. You've seen what Liverpool can do in the 96th minute, which I'm glad they conceded a late goal last week. That was an absolute delight, especially sat with a Chelsea fan. He was loving that. But you play against absolute top sides. We're not going to out football them. So what we've got to do is outgraft them, be organised. We'll take that Man United defeat on the chin. We'll move forward, and we've got an important game against Wolves coming up. That for me, this will really start to show our credentials, because you've got to go into them games and give a performance and pick up 3 points. Because on the road, it's going to be few and far between the chance to get them. Great result against Nottingham Forest, obviously. I don't think anybody expected that. I was more worried about the Nottingham Forest game than I was about the Man United game, so shows you what I know. But yeah, these home games are going to be vital. We've got, 29 points left to get before we're safe. So that's where we've got to pick them up, mate. You know what it's like when you come back up into the Premier League. You've kind of got one eye on that points tally and thinking, right, if we could just chip away at the 40 points, those home games become the crucial part to get you safety. But like you say, in terms of the start, absolutely astonished, mate. And I think there's more to come from certain players as well. So that's the exciting thing about it.
Couple of questions come in for you there. Graham Morton says, Ted, do you think it's early exuberance, or do you think you're able to pick up regular points? I guess you really partly answered that with your explanation about the Wolves game, because that's a kind of game that you need to be winning, and probably winning convincingly if you're going to have a really good season.
It's a great question, to be honest, Graham. Yeah, it's a little bit of both. A lot of teams that have come up in the past, including like the likes of Leicester, Burnley, when Company had them, they've tried to play expansive attacking football, and it doesn't work when you're a newly promoted side. So like I was just saying to you there, Steve, we've just got to be organised. So yes, the exuberance side of things, that comes into it because we've nicked late goals. We've got the late win against Brentford. So we're kind of like, we're pulling those kind of results out the bag as well. But I think we will regularly pick up points, because we are going to be very, very difficult to break down. You bear in mind that that back four or back five that we had against Manchester United, 2 of our regular defenders weren't even in amongst that. So we've still got additions to make there. And I think we'll be just really, really difficult to beat. So I think, yes, that's where the size of the hornet that's just flew past me there. That was absolutely terrifying. Dear God. Just went white.
The Watford fan.
Mate, it was bigger than any Watford fan I've seen. Great question, mate. I think it's a little bit of both. I'm going to sit on the fence for that one. I think we can chip away, and going away from home, I think we've just got to be nasty and horrible to try and break down and pick up the odd stray point from anybody in that bottom half. If we get points from the rest of them, that's absolutely great. I think we'll win games at home. I think we're starting to make that a really difficult place for teams to come and play against. As long as we obviously don't paint the black and white and allow everybody free drinks and free chocolates.
I can't wait for that derby. They don't have Hornets in Sunderland. Well, they might do, but he's in Cyprus. He's not in Sunderland.
Does it look like I'm in Sunderland?
No, definitely not. Gary says, are Sunderland an unknown quantity for many Premier League teams at the moment? With so many new signings, maybe other clubs just haven't sussed them out yet.
Yeah, again, another good question, Gary. That I think there's an element of that for certain. It's an unknown quantity for Sunderland fans, to be fair, because we're just getting used to seeing these players, and yeah, I think it's going to take a little while for Premier League teams to kind of figure us out. The joy of that is, and what we've got on the side is we have got pace in amongst the side. We've got a team that's full of running. So you can block wingers off. It used to be a case of if you stop Jack Clark and stop Paddy Roberts, then you've stopped Sunderland. That was certainly the case in League One and in the Championship as well. Whereas this time we've got a midfield that's full of running. We can, Isidore's absolutely got pace to burn. So there's a little bit of everything in that team. Even down to the fullbacks. We've got fullbacks who are performing way over the expectation of what we thought we would ever get. So yeah, we're an unknown quantity because there's that little bit of threat. Don't get us wrong, we're a counter-attacking side, and we are going to have to absorb a lot of pressure. But that means to break can come from anywhere. So I think in that case, yeah, I think we are an unknown quantity. Will they suss us out? Yeah, of course, because this is a league that's full of the best managers in the world. They will suss us out, but I'm sure Regis Labrise will already be kind of getting his chessboard out and thinking about that already and seeing what the next stage is.
Every time you say your manager's name, I always think of that Reet Petite song. Every time I hear it, it's just so it's weird. I can't get it out of my head. Graham Morton says, looking at the background, it looks like Stormy Amy has made millions of pounds of improvement to Sunderland.
Well, yes, yeah. It's let's see if we can just lift it up there. Yeah, it's
look at that, man. Look at
Pennywell's never looked so good.
Look at that. Barry
It's all right.
Says, Ted, do you think the club will invest in January? If so, which positions do you think they'll invest in?
I think there will, Barry. Yeah. I can't see it being many, maybe one or two. I think we do need cover for left back because Masuaku's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit suspect there. Dennis Serkin apparently is back in training, but he's going to be so far off the pace in terms of, he hasn't really had much of a pre-season. So I think a left back might be on the shopping list there. Centre backs, I think we're just about sorted there. Centre midfield's an interesting one because Dan Neil's just not been involved at all at this moment in time. He's on the bench, but I don't think Dan Neil's the sort of player who'll settle for that. And unfortunately, I don't think Dan Neil's going to cut the mustard as a Premier League player. Riggy's obviously been getting the nod ahead of Dan Neil, who was his captain last season, bearing in mind. So I think that tells you the way the club view it, that Riggy is higher up in the pecking order. So in that respect, possibly a centre midfielder as well. The forward line, who knows? Obviously, we're going to have Mundell back by the end of the year. Hopefully, maybe even in time for that derby as well, Steve, which is looming on the horizon. Obviously, Adingra will be out for the AFCON. So yeah, it's important to have somebody like Mundell back there. So front line, I think we're just there or thereabouts. So I'd say a centre midfielder and obviously a left back as well, potentially, because again, Anthony Patterson, I can't see him being happy to sit on the bench. Maybe he'll fancy a move out. Where that leaves us in terms of another keeper, I would have thought Matty Young will be the second choice keeper next season, who's on loan at Salford City and very, very highly rated. Steve, we spoke to Stevie Watson about a year and a half ago now when we did the radio show, and he was his manager at Darlington. And he was so impressed with Matty Young, saying this kid's going to absolutely go to the top of the game. So I think we may see Anthony Patterson shipped out. Whether that's in January, no idea. But yeah, I can certainly see that happening, certainly by the end of the season.
Okay, 15 minutes into the show, let's switch attentions to the black and white so that our Newcastle fans in the chat get a bit of a chance to ask me a few questions.
Are they getting bored?
We'll come back to Sunderland though. Craig says, have Sunderland got a Teletubby at left back? Maka Paka. I don't know what's he called. I've got
Masuaku.
There we go. How many Sunderland players? Yeah, we'll come back to that one as well. We'll come back to your questions later. So, Newcastle. It's been an up and down real start of the season. Really starting with start with the pre-season. It was such an awful transfer window for us. And I've got to be honest, even though I didn't know a lot of the players Sunderland were signing, Ted, I was jealous at the fact that you were getting your business done early and we seemed to be really struggling, mainly down to the fact that we didn't know whether the Swede was coming or going. But once he did go, which of course typically was on the second last game, second last day of the transfer window, we'd already made some good incoming. So at this moment in time, my half-term report is very positive. I'm pleased at where we're at. We're 3 points off the top of the Champions League table. We're 7 points off the top of the Premier League, and after we're by in the third round of the Carabao Cup, we navigated a tricky tie into the next round with another home draw. So I've got to be happy. If I'm going to be critical of Newcastle in any way, shape, or form, it's probably the fact that the goals scored tally isn't as probably good as maybe his last season at this stage. But you know what? It doesn't matter at the moment because we're not conceding goals at the other end, and that's a big positive, really, because it means that not only have we got a solid back four with the likes of Byrne and Shaw and Trippier and Emil Kraft, but we've also got that new back four that's emerged in Tino Livramento, Lewis Hall, Sven Botman, and we're new signing Malik Chow. And you know what? That's great because it's almost out of nowhere that we've now managed to get a player for every position between the sticks, with Ramsdale coming in on a season-long loan, and in the back four. And we were concerned about that at one point. How are we going to replace Trippier? How are we going to replace Dan Byrne? How are we going to replace Fabian Shaw? Well, we've done it now. And that is a major plus because that's Newcastle in football terms sorted for the next 4 or 5 years in the back four, possibly even longer. I'm probably doing them a disservice. The midfield at the moment is... Let me have a cup of coffee. The midfield, it is still... Yeah, cheers. It is still firing on all cylinders. That three in the middle is still doing very well. Tonali is exceptional. Some say, and some pretty well-respected football commentators insist that Tonali's probably one of the best players in midfield in the Premier League at this moment in time. One of the best they've seen, some say. But, when somebody like Paul Scholes, who's got, so many Premiership, FA Cup and Championship and European Cup medals, says he's the best, you've got to start listening. Joe Linton, always gets a yellow card, but you always need someone to break up play and stick the boot in. That's he's still capable of doing that. Bruno Guimaraes is defying his critics as well with some wonderful performances and a wonderful goal last weekend. So your midfield three is doing well. Is the players coming through? The big blow was Elliot Anderson. And that becomes more farcical as every game goes by, not just for Nottingham Forest now, but for England as well. Because, we let him go for nothing, really, in the grand scheme of things, because we had to sell him, to appease our financial situation, but also to keep the PSR away from our door, the issues that would come to our door. But in the cold light of day, looking at that deal, Newcastle sold him, for 35 million, but they had to buy a keeper who never played a first team game for 20 million. So in essence, we got rid of one of our biggest assets through the academy for £15 million. And when you look at him now, in today's terms, how much would it cost to bring him back? 80 million, probably. Because of his England, his England displays now as well. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. So, that one's a hard one to take. However, and I've just seen Barry's question about Lewis Miley. Is the Miley injury as bad as the rumours? I don't think so, Barry. But, again, I always say on this show, on our platform, don't believe Twitter. Wait until the club put it out there. But, Lewis Miley, I think, finally, and I feel cruel to say finally, he's only bloody 19, is starting to show the potential that he could step into the breach. I think Eddie's taken his time with him deliberately. I don't think that's been a positive for Lewis because, to him personally, because he probably feels after playing 30 plus games like he had in the past when we had a lot of injuries in there that he was going to be an ever present. But I think he's done the right thing. I think he's developed into a bigger lad. They've got him. He is fit. He puts his foot in. Not afraid to put his foot in. He's got a goal in him. But I think Eddie's done a bit of a masterclass with him. And I think, looking at him now, in the games that I've seen him come on in this season and play in this season, I think he's going to be the replacement, probably for Joe Linton. I think he could come in and do a job in there as like somebody who breaks up play, scores the odd goal. But physical attributes, I think, will help him. So I'm not as worried now as I was. And of course, the signing of Ramsey as well from Villa, who I haven't had really much of a chance to see other than down at Leeds when he obviously went off injured. He's back now. He'll be back for the Brighton game. There's another one who can play on that left and replace Joe Linton. So I think you've got players coming in who now can do a job in there. Who can, Newcastle won't be as thin on the ground if there's an injury. Don't forget as well, we've still got Joe Willock. His time at the club, I think, still looks as if it's on. It looks like he's on the way out at some point, but he's still a good player on his day and can still turn up and put a performance in. On the wings for us, I think they just haven't hit the ground running. Alanga hasn't hit the ground running, which I think to some people's disappointing, but he's shown flickers of brilliance. The Barcelona game, yes, it was a defeat, but God, he didn't look out of place, and he had them on the back foot in that first half. So I think our new signing in the summer, Alanga, will come good. Jacob Murphy can still put the ball, on a sixpence and land it on Big Nick's head. And he's still very capable of coming on and changing a game. But whoever he goes with on that right-hand side, I'm confident that we'll get something from from that side when they're playing. Similarly on the left, I think Anthony Gordon at times this season once again has tried too hard, and I think it's a mental battle with him sometimes. I think he's one of these people who talks to himself a lot, and I think that's a big issue. I think he's sometimes too focused on being the best that he can be. And I know he's quite intelligent, and I know he reads a lot of books and stuff on these kind of things. But sometimes he can overanalyze. Sometimes when you're as good a footballer as you are, like Anthony Gordon is, you should just go out and just do it. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes sometimes when you don't think about things, just get and do it. And I think that's a big thing with him. Harvey Barnes, I'll never change my mind on him. He's an impact sub. He's not somebody who can start a game and give you, 90 minutes of graft up and down that left-hand side. But for 20 minutes, Anthony Gordon going off and Harvey Barnes coming on is a match winner or a match saver. And I genuinely think that's his best position, on the bench, coming on and changing a game. Because not many people can do it. Sometimes it's difficult to get into a fast-paced game with 20 minutes to go and change things. But he can, and that's it, And Graham, you're right. It is another slow start. 9 points out of 7 is very frustrating when you think about how well we've played in some of those games, and that's the problem. However, like I said right at the start of my little piece, 7 points off the top. You take that. Sunderland would certainly take where they are, but Newcastle, 7 points off the top. I always say it's a bit like the tortoise and the hare. You don't want to be out in front in this European race. You want to be just in sight and creeping in towards the death. You know what I mean? And that's that's the way to do it. Because some teams exhaust themselves, some teams get complacent. You point back to that season we got promoted from the Championship when Brighton thought they had it done and Newcastle won it on the last game of the season. It's never over till the proverbial lady sings, and that's the way it is with Europe as well. So I'm not as concerned about that, but I know some people are. And Craig says if we hadn't signed Barnes, I doubt we needed to sell Anderson. It's ifs and ands, what pots and pans, Craig. I know where you're coming from in that, but the Anderson thing is really disappointing. Minty is disappointing. Really disappointing. I'm gutted about that, as well, because he's done very, very well. And for me, that was another big blow. Dave, you're right. He did play more than expected. Lewis Miley, people expected way too much of him. And I think we forgot how old he was. He's only 19. it feels like he should be 25. You know, he's been in and around the first team that long. And that's right. And David, you're right. Miley being developed by the first team as Bruno and Joe Linton get to 30. I've talked a lot there. I've talked for about 10 minutes without coming up for air, Tim. But I mean, is there anything that you want to ask me about Newcastle? Anything, because I mean, there's a lot of questions coming in. What's your
a few things, really? Yeah, I mean, one's more of an observation, really. You look at, I think in the issue you've got with Lewis Miley, not issue, but the nice problem you've got with Lewis Miley is very similar to the issue that we have with Chris Rigg. And I think, with the standard of players around both of those young players, I think that bodes well for both Newcastle and Sunderland, to be honest with you, because you're almost getting ready-made leaders to actually come into the squad when they are ready, and when they are sort of fully developed as players. How much would we both love it to see that a derby day where Lewis Miley's leading out Newcastle with the captain's armband on, Chris Rigg leading Sunderland out with his. That'd be just fantastic for the Northeast, and I think both managers are doing a cracking job of protecting them and actually developing them as players and as people as well. That's I remember it was probably a couple of years ago now, Lewis Miley getting absolute dog's abuse even from Newcastle fans for a tattoo he got. And I'm thinking, he's a young kid, let him go out and do daft things and make mistakes. That's part and parcel of it. And I think that there's an element of pressure that's put on young players, yes, but young players with talent, and more key to that is young players with talent from the area. And I think the fans put that little bit more expectation, that little bit more hope in them. And I would love to see the likes of Lewis Miley and Chrissy Rigg stick at the clubs and develop into fantastic players as well. You mentioned Big Nick, or Peter Kraut, as I call him. He's really starting to come into his own, mate. I'm impressed with him. Even his technique on a penalty just looked absolutely brilliant. Do you think Newcastle fans are kind of like over that hangover of Isaac now and are now embracing Big Nick and looking to the future?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's been a tough summer, and when you lose your striker like that, it's really, really difficult. Somebody who's been a talisman, somebody who's scored you lots of goals, somebody who you thought was going to be there for years to come, challenging Alan Shearer's record. But yeah, I do think we've got over it quite quickly. And I think the big thing for me, mate, is that, we needed to sell a player who was going to cause that kind of feeling amongst the fan base to get over that kind of biggest hangover that we've had since the 80s and 90s, which is Newcastle United's a selling club. They're selling their best players and they're not investing it back in the club. Well, for the first time in my living memory, Newcastle United have sold one of their biggest players, but what they've done is they've replaced him with better players. We didn't sell our best player because our two biggest pluses, our two biggest things at the club are Eddie Howe and Tonali. For me, I think those are the two biggest assets we have at this moment in time. Alexander Isak, goal scorers come and go. Goal scorers are there to finish off the good work that the rest of the team put in. Much like goalkeepers are there to stop the inevitable mistakes that defenders make. It's a weird scenario and it's a weird way to look at it, maybe. But you know what? As Graham says, to be a monster, you've got to sell well, as tough as it is at the time, and that's it. And I think the fact that we've had to go through that collectively as a fan base, selling our best player up front, it's become something which it'll help us progress as a club, Ted.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, to be honest, mate. The other thing that I think has caught other Premier League teams out, and I'm kind of leaning towards Barry's question towards me, this kind of unknown quantity or things that the club are not necessarily recognised for is, as you pointed out, Newcastle are really tough to break down. They've always been like sort of, had that kind of reputation as a pressing team, the entertainers under Keegan and all that sort of thing. But this time around, obviously, you've still got that element of being, really good attacking force. Like you say, Tonali pulling the strings. You've got good wingers. You've got a striker there, and Wissa when he comes in, another striker who could finish chances. But I think what's really raised eyebrows, certainly for me anyway, is now the inclusion of Chow in there and Botman turning into the player that I think we always knew he was. Only he's had absolutely horrendous injuries. That back four, I think, is a lot of teams are coming up against now and going, oh well, this isn't what we used to. We're kind of we're not used to playing through the back four and getting straight through to the goalkeeper. But are you impressed with what you've seen from this new look defence and what needs to happen next there?
Mike Chow is superb. I've got to be honest, the first couple of games, I'm like, God, will you stop trying to, stop doing that trick? You know what I mean? Stop doing this, stop doing that. But he's not getting caught out. I mean, he may do at some point, but you know what? What a player! What a classy player! And you can tell that he's got that experience. And I think as well, the big thing about Eddie Howe is he tends to sign players with a good attitude on and off the pitch. People who live well. It's that kind of Alex Ferguson guide to signing the perfect footballer. He's very careful. He does do checks on people, and I think I might have mentioned on this show before. Dan Byrne, when he did his big interview on the Overlap or on one of the other podcasts that he did, it might have been the one that Amanda Staveley's just done. But anyway, he talked on there about Eddie Howe ringing up one of his mates before he signed for Newcastle, and out of the blue, asking who he socialised with, what kind of person was he? Was he a bit of a drinker? He did his homework. And high performance, thank you, Blue Rhythm Boy. It was excellent to hear that, because that shows that this guy, this manager, is doing the right things for us. But yeah, I think Malik Chow has made a hell of a difference, and I think that his overall performances are keeping. Deliberately keeping Fabian Shaw out, and I never thought I would see Fabian Shaw struggle to get back in the team. I mean, the guy's been a colossus for us, a great servant, somebody who scored a wonderful amount of goals from centre half, but also stopped a lot of goals going in at the other end. He can't get back in the team, and that's what competition's all about. So yeah, that back four is the cornerstone of our success, whatever happens this season, and I think long may it continue. And well done to Nick Pope, because, I'm sure he doesn't listen to the critics. He is on social media. I'm sure he sees it if he wants to see it. But, Dave, who's in the chat, has been a huge fan of Nick Pope since he came. I haven't been critical of Pope. I can, like everybody, point to his kicking and say it's not the best, but I could take you through at least another 20 goalkeepers I've watched at Newcastle and pick up something that they weren't very good at. Shea Given, excellent shot stopper, wasn't a great kicker. There's so many. You'd take
a prime Shea Given every day of the week as well, wouldn't you?
Of course you would. So that's what I'm saying. You look at these things and think, well, you can be critical, but at the end of the day, it's all about, as Blue Rhythm Boy says, it's about the ability to gel with Eddie rather than having a big CV. And I think I think you're right. But yeah, excellent stuff. We're halfway through the show, and I don't think Jules is in the chat, but I know she does catch up because she likes to see if David comes. Now, I meant to show these last week. I don't know where anybody saw this. Somebody mentioned it in the chat on UFC Matters, I think. But Anthony Gordon and his haircuts. A lot of people quite critical of the hairband look that he's got at the minute. But people are saying that he's modelling himself on a former princess.
Wow.
Unbelievable, isn't it? It is unbelievable.
That's beautiful. He is the people's princess, I guess.
He is the people's princess.
Wow.
Fantastic. I love that. Thank you very much. Completely unfootball related, but I did find this amusing, Ted. Scientists at Princeton University have reconstructed this 3D model of how Eve, the first human woman created by God, may have looked.
Well, there we go.
No wonder we're in the predicament we're lads and lasses. There we go. I did like this one as well. I thought you'd appreciate this. A sign, Prince Andrew close. You bloody hope not. And I went out for a meal last night, Ted. I tell you what, I did finish it.
Oh. Right.
let's get back on the football related ones. A lovely picture Wayne Rooney drew of his son. Boss that Wayne really is. Breaking news from Nottingham Forest. The owner, Evangelos Maroccanas, has eaten Ange Postecoglou.
Might happen yet.
Award ceremony time. The Ballon d'Or goes to Gary Neville this week. And
Keep the politics out.
Ruined football shirts. A bold move getting your favourite category on the back of your shirt.
Oh. Don't know what it means.
Ange Postecoglou, Nottingham Forest, 0 wins, 0 clean sheets, 7 matches. He's become the third 007 manager. And I did like this. Something positive from Swansea this week. Half time is 15 minutes long. Use this time to check in on a friend or speak to the person next to you. I love that. Absolutely
That's
brilliant.
great. Love that.
Good use of a scoreboard at half time. And of course, yesterday was World National Mental Health Day. So perfect timing for that. I could pick either one of these as the winner this week. I'm going to go with this one a second. Eddie Howe presents the Big Effin' German, a Roald Dahl Classic Collection. Excellent. The winner this week is this one. Colin Truster, scorer of 217 goals in 43 games for Scarflick North End. A run which only came to an end when his tactic of snugging goalkeepers was deemed illegal by the FA. His autobiography is sadly no longer available in the club shop following a raid by the Vice Squad. Excellent. Great stuff. Thank you, everybody who sent us those. If you want to send one in, send it over to me, nufcmatters1892@gmail.com. Please title it Three's a Crowd so that they don't get stuck with our tweets of the week from NUFC Matters. Yes, and also send it over to the lads on socials if you've got them on there if you support Middlesbrough or Sunderland. Thank you very much. I do want to make a little announcement for those of you who are tuned in. I see there's a few of you from the NUFC Matters community. As you know, we always do a fanzine, subscription fanzine once a year. We've done 100 copies of it this year and we got 96 subscribers. So for Age UK, North Tyneside Dementia, we have raised the grand total of £1,902.14 for Age UK North Tyneside Dementia. We'll be making that donation over the weekend. But thank you to everybody from the NUFC.
Well done.
Thanks to everybody from the NUFC Matters community who's jumped in on that. Before we came on air, I did mention to Ted I wanted to discuss something which has been running for the last couple of weeks, and that is the little tete-a-tete on social media between two former stalwarts of the game. One from Newcastle United and one from Man U, and that is Roy Keane and Alan Shearer. I didn't like him. I had loads of rooks with him, and I wasn't the only one. It was Alan Shearer's response to being called sneaky. Of course, many Newcastle fans will remember the infamous situation that developed at the Gallagher end in a game between the two clubs, where Alan Shearer stood stoically as Roy Keane tried to punch the chops off him. So, what's your thoughts on this, Ted? I thought I'd ask you because ultimately you have a connection with Roy Keane as a Sunderland fan. He was your manager, good manager. I felt. Thought he might well have gone back at one point. But Roy Keane calling Alan Shearer sneaky and failing to show him any respect for being the Premier League's top goal scorer. And I'm not expecting you to come on and wax lyrical about Alan Shearer, but what did you take at the spat?
I'll turn my notes up then. No, you're right. Listen, for me, it's the two born leaders, Steve. I'm happy that they don't like each other. I think if they were all pally, that just wouldn't be as entertaining, would it?
No.
I think Roy Keane is right in a certain respect. The sneaky thing. Alan Shearer was an old-fashioned centre-forward at times where he could get the elbows in and give it back to defenders. You've got to bear in mind that when Alan Shearer was coming through, as a young kid, when he first went to Southampton and places like that, it was still in the days of defenders absolutely laying one on him in the first 5 minutes and letting them know they were there. He was getting kicked up a height. So he was one of those forward players who had a bit of physicality about him, and would use the elbows. I wouldn't say he was particularly sneaky about it. I think he was quite overt about it most of the time. But listen, he could be naughty, but what player wasn't? We're kind of losing that physicality out of the game at this moment in time, and Keane and Shearer epitomised classic Premier League battles for me. In Roy Keane, you imagine if you had an A team, and it could have happened at one stage, where Alan Shearer's leading the line and Roy Keane pulling the strings in midfield, you would have one of the greatest Premier League sides of all time, if not the best. And they both had that. I think it probably comes more out of a respect than a hatred. It is the fact that they were playing for two massive clubs, very, very physical players, very good players. Obviously, Roy Keane, a completely different type of player, being a midfield general, a box-to-box midfielder, but arguably one of the best in his class. Alan Shearer's record is there that speaks for itself. So I'm not massively surprised that they have a dislike for each other. But I think the media like to sort of make it out bigger than what it is as well. But I think it's probably born out of some sort of begrudging respect that they have for each other. It's great to see, because, to be honest, do we get as many characters like them anymore, Steve? I would say probably not. I don't think we'll get as big a personalities and that kind of blood and snot kind of player that both of them lads were.
I've got to admit, some of the comments, Keane is a soundbite. He's been robbing a living being a pundit. I've enjoyed him as a pundit, Graham. I quite like the fact that he's very critical of Manchester United, when in fact, as a Man United legend, he could be very positive about them and paint over the cracks, but he
doesn't
is
hide.
Very honest. No, I think I've told this story before, but I came out at King's Cross once, and I saw Keane walking forward to me, and just out, I just decided to be a little bit mischievous, and I started singing Keno, there's only one Keno, and he looked at us, and then as he walked, he like nodded, and then I then chucked in the line about how can I put it, doing something with his dog, and as I turned round to see what his reaction was, he stuck his finger up like that. I thought, fair play to him, but he thought I was a fan. I wasn't, but he took it in the right way. But yeah, does Keane respect anyone? I don't think he does. Didn't Keane break Haaland's senior's leg? Yes, he did. And that's something.
Yeah, there's a longer story to that, though. That was a bit of revenge. Well, I am going to stick up for Roy Keane on that one. The way that Alfie Inge Haaland actually gave him dog's abuse, he was calling Keane a diver, and I mean Keane was out for some ridiculous amount of time with a serious injury after that as well.
So break his leg for calling him a name.
Tit for tat.
Oh my God! God, I'm glad I didn't play against you on a Sunday. Jesus Christ! Keane comes across.
I was one of the nicer ones.
Tried to kick somebody with the backside. I thought that was bad on a Sunday, but actually, going in and breaking someone's leg, I couldn't agree with that. Keane comes across as someone who loved to dish it out but didn't like it back. I would agree with that as well. How I didn't get chin mouthing off about Keane's visiting my ex in Cork, I don't know. He's still got beef with Jason McAteer too. He's probably got a hit list, Ian.
That was one of the greatest sendings off I've ever seen live. Of Jason McAteer going, yeah, just put it in your next book. That was absolutely world class seeing that. And I mean, for somebody like Jason McAteer, who, let's face it, he's absolutely, he's as thick as mince. He gets called Dave for a reason. But yeah, when Jason McAteer gets one over on Roy Keane, that was hilarious to watch. Brilliant.
Yeah, very funny. Okay, well, that's good. Well, plenty of comments coming in about that as well, which I agree with some of them and don't agree with some of the rest.
Is he the most hated player? So obviously, when Alexander Isak next turns up at St James's Park, he's going to get dog's abuse. That's fair enough. But there seems to be this uniform hatred of Roy Keane from Newcastle fans. Is there any other fans any other player that the fans really, really detested SJP?
I've got to be honest, Michael Owen is the one who, and Barry's just stuck in the chat, just as I've said it, Michael Owen is somebody who would always get dog's abuse. And I think it's just, he didn't want to come to Newcastle in the first place because he thought Liverpool were going to come back in for him. They didn't. So Newcastle was like the next best option. Newcastle were paying stupid money at that time. And I think what he's done subsequently is really just mug Newcastle off. And I just think that's why people don't really like Michael Owen. Andy Cole gets dog's abuse. I don't agree with that. And although I'll understand why people will have a pop at Isak when he comes back, the let's not forget what those players did for the club. They were superb. You know what I mean? And I don't ever want to criticise Andy Cole and his time at Newcastle. What he did subsequently, standing at Cardiff's pitch after they whopped us in the semi-finals of the FA Cup, singing cheer up Kevin Keegan, is you can't forget that kind of thing. But at the same time, Andy's always spoke very highly of Newcastle. He was a young lad at Newcastle, and he made the decisions that he had to make. He wasn't living in the most welcoming of areas at the time as well. And we don't exactly know what went on behind the scenes. A lot more comes out now. I've spoken to Andy. I keep in touch with Andy, but I think Newcastle fans should give him a break. And I think in time people will with Isaac, but at the moment it's still very raw. What about Sunderland? I mean, the players that get dogs abuse, is it mainly players who, I don't know, are of black and white persuasion? Is there anybody who played for Newcastle? I can imagine there was Jack Rodwell wouldn't be welcomed back with open arms.
Jeez, mate, honestly, I felt like booing his name when you just said it, to be honest. That's a strange one, because I don't think to my knowledge, he's never came back to Sunderland as a player with another club. But I mean, yeah, the reaction of Jack Rodwell is just. I've obviously, the company that I work for has sort of workforce all around the world, and my boss is a Sporting Lisbon fan, but he watched the Netflix documentary, and even he was saying how he can't stand Jack Rodwell after he saw the way things developed on there. So you've got this Portuguese guy who's got no affiliation to Sunderland going, yeah, absolutely, what a prat, yeah, nobody can stand him. In terms of players, it's do you know what? It's more ex-players than it is ex-Newcastle players, I would say. But I'll give you one that encompasses both, that is absolutely detested to this day. Two of them, in fact. One's Joey Barton, who probably he spits at his own reflection, to be honest. But the other one is Michael Chopra. And Chopra is one of those that is just absolutely universally detested. It's for obvious reasons that the scuffed his shot against Newcastle United where we could have won the game. And yeah, that's I would say he's probably Bob Moncur, Lee Clark. Good point, David. Still adored by both, I would say. Clark, do you know what it is? I mean, I know you speak to Clark, and I know he's actually a good lad and all that. He would have been a Sunderland legend if not for that, because he was absolutely adored. He did the thing that anybody going to your rivals should do, is just roll your sleeves up and graft and graft and graft. And that's what he did. He was a very, very good player for us. For me, forgiven but not forgotten.
I think so. I think you'll get a lot of Sunderland fans who quietly whisper that they've got still got a lot of respect for Lee Clark and what he did. But yeah, I mean, Clarky tells some great stories about it on the after dinner circuit. He never badmouthed Sunderland. He said he's delighted he went there. He went at the right time, and from his perspective, he would never change that. So there is a mutual respect. I love the fact as well, though, that he got the call from England prior to signing for Sunderland, and he'd been tipped the wink that Glenn Hoddle was going to pick him. So he got back onto his agent and managed to get written into his contract, which he was just about to sign, that if he got picked for England, he'd get a pay rise. So then he turns up at the press conference at Sunderland wearing a black and white tie, which Peter Reid goes absolutely mental about. And as they're just settling down in the press room, ready for him to sign, to do his press conference about signing for Sunderland. And bearing in mind, he's just had this contract redone with the England clause in, and he's just put pen to paper in the room before coming out to speak to the masses. It comes up on the old Sky ticker tape. New Sunderland signing Lee Clark has just been announced in the England squad, and Peter Reid turned to him and went, he was foaming, absolutely foaming. Very clever, but it's a great story. But yeah, he's got a lot of respect. Was Jeff Clark highly thought of? He was immense at the tune. I think he was, wasn't he? He was a Sunderland legend, Jeff Clark. I mean, it might be slightly before your time, I'm thinking, Ted, but
little.
Yeah, he was like the Gary Rowell and Kevin Arnott era, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. It's one of those where it was more my dad's cup of tea than mine. Like, but yeah, listen, Jeff Clark was always well liked by the fans. There's one of my favourites. He's been a feature of What the Fact in the past as well as Barry Venison is still to this day the youngest ever cup final captain at Wembley when it was the 1985 Milk Cup against Norwich City. He was captain of
Great
Sunderland.
game.
And that,
Great result.
yeah, well, yeah. I nearly swore there. Go forth, Stephen.
Shea Given did play for Sunderland. Newcastle nicked Shea Given off Sunderland, didn't they, really?
He was on loan from Blackburn, and Kenny Dalglish was in charge of Blackburn, and I forget who we had at the time. Might have been was it Alec Chamberlain? It might have been who picked up an injury. Yes. And we brought in Shea Given as this absolutely unknown. And yeah, if you look at the back, you remember the single, the Simply Red and White, Cheer Up Peter Reid, the original version, not the Geordie version. Yeah. If you look at the back of that CD, on the little barcode on the bottom, it says Shea is God 1. He was absolutely adored. Yeah, Shea was an absolute revelation that season. I've never seen a young keeper player like that. Lionel Perez, you can keep that one, Ian.
Worst keeper we ever signed, Lionel Perez. We ended up getting him at Newcastle as well. What a clip he was as well. Dear me, absolute mess. David went to school with Venison, younger, but gave us prefect a hard time. He was always in trouble. Yeah, Venice was probably always in trouble as a player as well. Let's finish with a couple of other things. Thank you for that, Ian. He says, Steve, by the way, Northern Ireland wore black armbands for Willie McFall and Peter McParland. Also a minute applause. Thank you. Yeah. But that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Ted. What does Sunderland do for players that pass away? Because there's a little bit of angst and annoyance at our football club, and it doesn't happen very often because they get a lot of things right. But John Gibson, who does our podcast on a Thursday, put a wonderful article together for the Chronicle about this. Newcastle have stopped paying tribute to legends. What they did was they wore black armbands for Willie McFall at the match last weekend. But there was no announcement. It was in the programme. It's on the website. It's on the social media. We're sorry to hear the passing of. But we don't allow the fans now to pay respect by a minute's applause or a minute's silence. Do you still do that?
Yes, yeah, it's still very much a thing there. Which I see the reaction of Newcastle United fans, and I think they're absolutely right. I think you should be given that opportunity. Willie McFall was there at the club during quite a difficult point of the history as well. It was turbulent times for Newcastle, and he's one of them. He's probably one of the managers that you remember first as well, Steve. He also was
a player. I mean, he was a player. He won the Fairs Cup. He got us to the cup final in '74, and he gave 20 plus years service to the club.
Well, yeah, that's it, and I'm happy to say that Sunderland definitely still do that. Right. They certainly commemorate even anniversaries. All right, there might not be a minute's applause on the pitch, but they'll mark the passing of Ian Porterfield or somebody like that, and Bob Stoke, or they do carry the history of the club, as a very, very heavy and deep rooted thing, and I think Newcastle fans do the same. I think it's maybe it's just a little bit of educating the owners want to go through, and I think they should afford the fans the opportunity to pay the respects. I think a minute's applause is usually the best way, because you're always going to get idiots in the away end who's going to try and spoil things. Unfortunately, a minute's applause I think is more than fitting to show respect for ex-players, ex-managers, and and people related to the club. You see the way that a lot of football clubs sort of rallied around someone like Bradley Lowry, and every fan likes to show respect for somebody who they care about deeply related to football.
Yeah, Les, I get where you're coming from with that. Fans could take appreciation into their own hands by clapping as the fallen players' number has reached. Yet again, the club should recognise these guys. I just think sometimes fans taking it into their own hands can end up being lost. If it's, well, I just think it gets lost. I think the club should do it. I think the winning format for Newcastle this season, because we've missed Wyn Davies, we've missed John Tudor from the back end of last season, we've missed Willie McFall. What we need to do is we need to, at the end of this season, on the scoreboard, have a little bit of sentimental music, have a picture or video of these players playing for Newcastle and those we have lost in this last calendar year. That's what they need to do, and then go back to the original format at the start of next season, because it's something which, it might be minor to some people, but for others, it's a lovely way to pay respect. And I tell you who it means a lot to: the family members. The wives, the sons, the daughters, the aunties, the uncles, the brothers, the sisters. It means a hell of a lot to them. And I do know how upset some of these people have been. Anne Tudor, John Tudor's wife, was very upset by this. So, it does need to be addressed. I will, at some point, email the Chief Executive Officer this week about it, just to get my views across, and hopefully something will be done about it in due course.
But, I mean, you look at somebody like Man City, and I mean, there's a lot to not like about Man City as a football club. But after the passing of Ricky Hatton, having his kids come on the pitch as mascots and that kind of thing, that was such a lovely touch. So there's the football community still can show it cares. Look at the mascots in the England game. Honestly, it nearly broke my heart having to mention. Superb. And football still has that power to kind of to move people, to show emotion and show love, and without trying to sound too cheesy about it. I think that needs to be cared for more and shown more, because there's a lot of toxicity out there. You look at social media, you look at the hate that's going on there. Let football fans show themselves in the positive light as well, because the vast majority of us are.
Yeah, 100%. Couple of questions before we finish. One for Newcastle and one for Sunderland. How many players do Sunderland lose to AFCON? Do you think they'll cope, Ted?
I think the last time I looked, it was 6 or 7. So it's quite a few. Having said that, I think we'll still cope. The likes of Gertruda, who was brought in. We've got the cover there. Like I say, Mundell's going to be back, so that takes care of the issue on the left wing as well. The only concern for me is going to be in the middle of the park, where we lose 2 of our 3 central midfielders. The good thing about this is that some of those players are going to be back after 2 games. It's not all of them can go all 8 games and get into the final. So as that tournament lasts, we're going to have more and more of them come back. So it's going to be tough. Don't get me wrong. I think we probably, judging by the injury to Diarra, I don't think he'll make AFCON because of the surgery he had. But he will be back in Premier League action by then. I just don't think he'll make it for international duty. So our record signing is fit for the derby, hopefully. And yeah, listen, we'll take it from there. It's going to be a tough challenge, and I think that's why Riggy is getting some game time now, is to prepare himself for that.
And a question from Roger about Silverstone, our guy who I bumped into on the train last week and had a little chat with. He is obviously the guy who brings in the money, the big dollars for Newcastle in commercial sponsorships and stuff. Is he showing his worth with Visa? I certainly think he is, Roger. And I've got to say, I know we've given him a little bit of stick on here, which is, on NUFC Matters, which is our job at times. You want to hold the club accountable. If you think somebody's not doing their job, there's nothing wrong with saying you don't think they're doing their job, as long as you're doing it in a polite and sensible way. And I think he's brought in quite a few sponsorship deals in recent months, and I think the programme that you get at the match tells you that. So yeah, fair play to Silverstone. He's dug away and done well, and I'm sure the new chief executive will get him in this kind of just get him into his mindset and what he wants to do. So I think slowly but surely things are changing behind the scenes in a more positive way. I think the acquisition of Ross Wilson from Nottingham Forest is interesting. I don't know a great deal about him. But what I will say is that you just need to look at how well the clubs have done that he's been at in the past. Yes, there might not be as many high-profile clubs in there as maybe some other chief executive officers have been at, but this sporting directors have been at, but this guy it looks like a decent track record, and he comes valued. So the most important thing about Ross Wilson coming in is hopefully he gets on very well with Eddie Howe. And that's the big thing, because our previous incumbent in that job didn't get on with Eddie Howe and got off to a bad start. So that's it. We've done an hour. Right, who, Ted?
Should we have him back next week? I don't know. I mean,
we could do.
We didn't do any championship stuff. We'll have to hear about it all next week. Like,
Great stuff, great hour. Please subscribe to all the socials at Ted the Mackham, at Steve Wraith on X, and at Invictus on Twitter. And you can subscribe to all of our YouTube channels. We will be back with a little bit more of Three's a Crowd next week.
Three's a Crowd podcast will return. That's not a threat, it's a promise.